Hey guys, it's Cyrus of Chaos. I'm here with Mihail Etropolski. He was my third coach, and we worked together for quite a long time. We eventually became training partners and traveled around the world to different tournaments together. And today we're going to talk about our wish list of technology that could be applied to fencing right now with things that already currently exist. So I'm going to let Mike introduce himself, and then we're going to start talking about some of these ideas for improving fencing. So Mike, take it away.
Hi, like Andrew said, I'm a former competitive fencer and current coach. I was a member of the 2009 Pan American Men's Saber team and a team national champion in, was it 2010?
Something like that. I don't remember.
Something like that. It
Yeah.
might have been 11. I don't know.
It happened at some
Uh,
point.
and a one-time coach of Cyrus of Chaos. Uh, And right now, I'm a coach with Sheridan Fencing Academy in New York City and specifically in Queens. And this is the idea, like Andrew said, that we had for things that we desire to see in fencing, improvements or shortcomings that can be met with technological advents.
Yeah. So I think your list is a little longer than mine. Do you want to start with?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with the big one, which is something that people talk about a lot, which is a way of standardizing refereeing,
Oh yeah.
and whether that, yeah, I guess that could sound like a joke, um, especially in Sabre, but um, doing that through motion tracking and through camera systems and through computer systems, right? So the those types of technologies have gotten really, really advanced and at an affordable level, to the point of people's tablets and phones and stuff like that have amazing cameras
Yeah.
and not just cameras. I guess the new iPads and probably iPhones are going to have lidar, I think,
Hmm.
which can it's is it a form of radar? I have no idea. Or infrared tracking? I don't know. But they have all these technologies that can produce almost a 3D image, very detailed uh, people and objects and stuff like that. And one of which, I guess, let's back up a little bit. What would the concept be? The concept of a robot or automated referee would be a camera system that can track both fencers and that can track both fencers in a very nuanced way, such as their arm extensions, their leg movements, their stops, their accelerations, the change of direction, and stuff like that. Right. So if you have that information, there's two ways that you can go about using it. One is you can make algorithmic rules to try to say, if a person does this, if the angle of their arm is this, if they're extending this way, that they might have right of way, right? Or if the action changes like this, this person stops, change direction, this person starts at this moment, right? That constitutes right of way. That is probably going to be a very difficult thing to do because of the infinitely nuanced way that people can move. I think what is more likely that you can do is identify the times where right of way can change, feed the data to a computer, a machine learning, um, you know, operation, and have it figure out, oh, this is the moment where right of way happens. This is the moment where an attack starts. This is the moment when, and the way you would do that is feed it the data, like I said, about the joint extensions and stuff like that, the skeletal tracking data, and then someone has to manually say, this is left, right of way, right, left, etc., until the machine learning has enough data to make its own conclusions about right of way. And again, these are all technologies that exist today. Whether or not you can identify those moments so concretely where right of way can change, that remains to be seen. but I don't think it's as overall complicated idea as people sometimes think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually really the only important thing to right of way is what happens, or to determining right of way for like the algorithm, is what happens in the last 2 seconds or so of the touch. And so by that logic, you wouldn't even need to identify the changes in things. You just kind of like the software that Nick Mayer created, the replay system that we use in the United States. It just retroactively cuts the last 2 seconds so that you can watch it. And I think that's all you'd really need for the video to do, because in most cases, 2 seconds is really all that you need to determine what what happened finally in the action. Like, there's nothing that I can't think of a single situation in my head right now where something that you did more than 2 seconds ago would have a huge effect on right of way without something 2 seconds later changing it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Talking about Saber, obviously.
Yeah, sorry.
And and
But even in foil as well.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess I have two things to say to that, which is correct. But it's not necessarily over a long period of time. For example, in Saber, you can have two people start off the line. Those are the times where they're going to be most important, right?
Yep.
To have standardized refereeing. And one person could start earlier, so then they have right of way at that point. But then it could change depending on what happens, like if they pull their hand back or stuff, and then it can change again maybe if the other person makes mistakes. So,
but that's
you can have.
That's the cool thing. That's the cool thing about machine learning, is that, like, it's this kind of black box where, like, for example, with facial recognition systems, you have this like multi-layered neural network, and each layer is responsible for something different. So the top layer might be responsible for looking at the whole face, but as you break each node down, it decides that there's certain important features. Like, one or two nodes might look at the eyes for recognition, another one might look at the nose and mouth, and that makes up a layer. And so, like, the neural network decides for itself once you start giving it the yes or no feedback. And so you wouldn't even really need to get into the nitty gritty of all that. You would just tell it, like, you don't even need to say like attack and prep or anything. You just say, like, this is a touch left, this is a touch right. And the machine, if you trained it with a referee who knew what they were doing and enough accurate data, it wouldn't even need any knowledge of the sport. It would just, kind of like if you trained someone to watch and referee with no knowledge of the rules at all, they would eventually just figure out what's going on because they get enough feedback. And it's kind of like that. You don't need to explain those things to the machine. It just figures it out through feedback. So
Yeah, that is that's a great explanation of because most people don't know and why should they, what machine learning is, or how it a neural net is built up. But that's a good point, that if the data is reliable, I guess, and robust enough, then yeah, you don't even know why it thinks that a touch is this, but if you feed it enough, Vasil Milenchev said this is touch left, this is touch right. If you do that 100,000 times or a million times or whatever, hopefully not a million.
Yeah, if he's willing to say yes or no that many times.
Well, I figure it would come from mining.
I'm just kidding.
Old touches and stuff like that. Yeah. But if you can sit them down for 24 hours a day for a month straight, then maybe, yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. And to my point, if the data is reliable enough, I think you can get reliable enough data with pretty affordable devices. So I don't know if you want me to share a video. Can I try that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I cannot. Only you can. Well, I guess you can splice it in afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a device called Kinect. Well, everybody knows Kinect from the Xbox games, but Microsoft spun it off as just a motion tracking product for PC developers, to put to whatever kind of uses that they know. And I think their latest one is called Azure Connect.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a developer kit for whatever. And the video, I guess, hopefully that will be shown is of how reliably it can track skeletal data. So it can tell, where a person's elbows are, where their shoulders are, where their legs are, feet, head. If we didn't have masks, it could even, can get minute enough to track
Facial movements.
eyes.
That's pretty cool.
Mouth and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can do all this for multiple people, not just one. So you can have one device for, the bout. I think you had mentioned even that would be cool to be able to tell if somebody does a false start. So potentially you can even track the referee's hand saying, fence or ale. And
something I see that's very, very arbitrary and is hard to police correctly, especially with certain replay systems, is the false starts in saber fencing. And these days it's such an advantage to go before the other person because the attack is so strong that everyone wants to go as soon as possible. And it's first of all, it's not punished very consistently, and second of all, it's really hard to tell sometimes if a false start happened, even defining what one is. Some referees will give you a false start if you're like leaning before, others won't do it unless your feet move. And so it's just kind of all over the place. And standardizing that, like with the technology that you mentioned, you could police that really easily. And then there would be no ambiguity as to like who started first. Did he make the motion? Was it before or after? Because I've seen people get carded for moving after the touch happens, and there's no way to prove that didn't happen. And conversely, I've seen very obvious false starts that were not punished, and it's really hard because some of the replays don't keep track of anything unless a light is turned on. So it's impossible to prove that afterwards. So
yeah, well, not just that, but you don't hear the referee's audio cue on the replay.
Yes, that's another problem associated with the false start.
Yeah, so you could make it so when the referee's hands go, that's the official signal to go. I don't know if that's the way to go, but there's you can at least see who moves first, like you're saying, or who leans forward first and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So hopefully the video came across, and all it would really require to make a mock-up test is to have somebody that can work with, the SDK, somebody who's a decent programmer, which I am not. I'm familiar with scripting and programming and computer logic, but not adept enough to do it. Just to sit down in a fencing room with this developer kit, which is not crazy expensive. I think you can get it for $300 or $400, and start filming with this camera some actions, and look at the data that you stream through the SDK and the skeletal track. Are you getting specific patterns when a person does a lunge? Are you getting specific patterns when a person pulls their hand back or is hesitating and stuff like that? Yeah. Actually, you don't even need patterns. Can you identify those motions in numbers? I guess is a big thing. Like, you don't need to look for patterns because, like you're saying, the neural net will
figure it out itself
to glom onto.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the big thing, and I will say that since you have a bunch of viewers, hopefully some of them can reach out to you and try to see if there's a way to make this happen. Because I think it would just be a great thing for the sport.
Totally.
I remember when video replay was just introduced at the Olympics, there were some other sports pointing to fencing, saying, "Oh, look, they got their act together. Why can't you be more like fencing?" I think that was said to the Taekwondo International Commission, or whatever their governing body is, because they have similar, refereeing inconsistencies and stuff like that. Yeah. And that was seen as a huge, I guess, boon to the sports, like Olympic, presence. It's something that's modernized and something that's easy to understand and makes it more fair and more universal and stuff like that. So
yeah,
if you could go the full, do that fully to standardize refereeing, then I think that would be an amazing admin. So
Yeah.
that's the number one thing.
And I think the holy grail of that, right, would be if you could have an app that does it, and then like literally you just stand there like this, recording the bout, and then the app will just tell you like that's touch left, and
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, I'm saying the way to start would be with this developer's kit device that you have to hook up to a PC and
yeah.
stuff like that.
But once
But
you get this working, there's no reason that it couldn't be turned into an app and distributed to everybody.
yeah,
And because of that, if you have an app that calls touches reliably, you could pretty much turn everyone into an FIE level referee in most cases. But
yeah, it can be done now the way that you're saying on an app, only because the phones and tablets now have this amazing camera technology
yeah, totally.
that is rarely utilized to its full potential. You know.
Yeah. So pivoting a little bit, but still talking about like the video replay stuff. Another thing that I would like to see a lot, which I think would help improve refereeing a lot, is having some sort of indication on either the main machine or just in the replay of when there's blade contact. Because before the timing change, and we're going to call them old timing, short timing, and new timing, just to disambiguate things. Before the timing change from from short timing to new timing, the hardest thing to see was attack and preparation versus attack counter attack in the box. But now, because the timing is a little bit wider than it used to be, I think the hardest thing to see is parry repost versus mal paré. And so a lot of the time, as a referee, I have to decide whether the sound that I heard happened before the light came on or vice versa. But it's really hard to do that, especially when you go back to replay, because as Mike mentioned earlier, there is no sound in the replay. And so a lot of the time you're basically just guessing, especially if the action happens on the other side of the person. So if I'm angled like this and the action, I try to take a 3 parry or something, it's very, very difficult to see. Or worse, if I can't even angle myself correctly. But if I try to take a 4 parry and I'm like facing away from the camera, like if I try to do it like this, you can't see my target at all versus where the blade is. And so that becomes very, very difficult. But if you had a light that indicated blade contact, it would be a simple matter of seeing the blade light goes on, then the target light goes on, or the other way around. And then no guessing, you just know. Contact first, then blade contact, it's mal paré. Blade contact first, then contact, it's parry repost. There would be no guessing. There would be no histrionics for like, oh, I can't believe you didn't call that parry repost. Like that tiny thing, which could happen right now, would clear up so much of that nonsense. And I think that would be an easy thing to do that would really improve that situation a lot.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if you need anything new besides like a new casing for the boxes that exist, because I'm pretty sure all machines track blade contact because they all have some kind of
whip over protection. Yeah.
So all you need, I mean, you if you're an electronic engineer, I guess, you can probably find that line and maybe even feed like a little LED to it. But yeah, that seems like a very simple thing that machine manufacturers should make. But I guess, there has to be some motivation from, either the FIE or something like that to even have that. I know a lot of times they don't want you looking at data that they don't think is relevant. So I guess it's more the case to make to them that this is relevant, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think this is very relevant. Yeah.
And I don't know if the VSM, the software-based fencing machines have that.
I don't know either.
But that's even easier to add, in a piece of software. And that's actually something if you're doing what would you call it? Not a robot referee, I guess. A
virtual referee.
Virtual referee, autonomous referee. You would need that data, right? Because
yeah, exactly.
They have to be able to detect blade contact if there's a change in right of way.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, and one thing that I was talking to before the video that I wanted to bring up was this might be a fever dream or something, but those really old analog machines, those just like a little blurry light bulb that lit up and just went bang, like with a really annoying buzzer sound, like, you know, from 30, 40, 50 years ago.
When it was first created.
Yeah, I feel like I have seen a blade contact light on one of those. I don't know when I saw it. I don't know if I'm imagining it. I probably am. But just like when you hit yourself, there's the
ground
yellow
light.
light in Saber.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen one with a light for blade contact. So again, to your viewers, if anybody does remember something like that, let Andrew know.
Yes, please leave it in the comments.
Because, yeah, that would be a cool piece of trivia to track down. But like I said, I'm probably imagining it.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to your next item?
Actually, you mentioned the next item that I had, which was the sensor for false starts, which could be incorporated into what you were talking about. But yeah, if there was without your system, there could be another way to just, like, I don't know, strap a device to each person's front foot or something, if that's the metric that you're measuring false starts by. And when the referee says fence, they could press a button, and that would turn off, like, the sensitivity. But before that, if the person moved and you didn't press the button, it would cause, like, a beep to go off, and then the person could get a penalty for that, for example. And I think again, for the reasons that we talked about earlier with false starts, I think that however best you think to control them, they're definitely a problem in our current refereeing climate, where, I mean, the current trends climate, where the attack is just so powerful and everyone is trying to get that, like, that split second advantage. So.
Do you know, not technology related, but rules related, I think you and I might have talked about this briefly. What is the deal with referees being told to say pre and ale or ready, fence, close together?
It really depends on the level. I've been told at a high level before that there should be no space between the two words, but I've also been and that they should be, like, a very consistent cadence. But I've also been told that there should be space between the words and that you should vary your cadence. So I've heard all over the spectrum on that one. And I will personally say that I like having space between pre and ale, and I like to vary the cadence, because if you get into a consistent pattern where you're saying pre and ale too close together, then on the time that you decide not to do it, the referee, will be causing a false start to happen. And so I don't think that that's a good way to do it, because basically you're conditioning them to start falling forward as soon as you say pre. And then if you don't say ale really quickly, they'll fall forward, and that'll be your fault. So my personal approach to it is I'll always put at least one tempo between pre and ale, and then sometimes I'll lengthen that. So I'll say en garde, pre, ale. Next time, en garde, pre, ale. And that kind of stops people from being able to guess the timing that I'm going to say something, but it also removes the problem where people are false starting because of me. I personally almost never have any false starts in my bouts unless the room is very, very noisy. And in that case, it's very difficult to prevent it. But one of the things...
Yeah, I find the same thing that I've when I've refereed, and I thought that was general guidance for referees, but I guess not. But what I find even more wild is I've been told by an FIE ref that they've been instructed to say them close together as a means to cut down on false starts, which is nuts.
Yeah, the logic of that doesn't make any sense to me. I've been
absolutely nuts, and it's gotten really, really annoying to watch because of that. Because, like, the referee doesn't even know who started early, because when it's all one word, like, how do you know they didn't start on
the right beat? Yeah, totally. Yeah, so that's I've also heard both, and my personal preference is a lot of space between pre and ale, and also to vary that amount of space. But
yeah,
I
was told by the person who gave me my referee certification 20 years ago. No, probably like 10, 15. Your former coach, Bruce Gilman.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my first, like, exposure to refereeing. So I knew that from the get-go that you're supposed to vary your cadence to avoid that.
Yeah.
And that was when small starting wasn't a problem.
No, it wasn't a problem back then, not at all. Because going fast back in those days was almost like a disadvantage unless you did it very sparingly.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'll move on to my next item. Thanks for the sidebar. Which is as opposed to a competition tool, a training tool, which is sensors, little motion sensors that can be attached to a person's shoes or ankles or, otherwise feet area. I always joke around with my students when they're doing, whatever footwork. I'm like, if you keep bringing your ankles together, your feet close together, I'm going to attach 2 little sensors, and when they get too close to each other, they're going to give you a shock. And one time a kid took me seriously, and I guess I had to stop joking about that. But it would be a good idea to
make it
as
beep
a
or
training
something.
tool for you. You're doing not the shock, but a little audio, a little audio signal of if your feet are close, getting too close together. So, a lot of training is about what your body feels like.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mentioned I work at Sheridan Fencing, and we were lucky to have you for an exclusive Q&A last week. And you mentioned how watching yourself in video shows you're doing stuff that you don't feel like you're doing.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right? That's why it's important. So this is a way to have it in real time. Like if you're doing footwork, you're focused obviously on something else. You're focused on recreating some kind of action, on your speed, blah, blah, blah. So you might feel like your feet are in the right distance apart from each other, but you'll hear the audio cue and you can instantly relay that to the feeling that you just had in your feet and your legs. Oh, I felt like this when my feet were too close together or I was off balance or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the most basic function, to attach 2 things to your feet. And that, again, is all easy existing tech, and that can probably be done pretty cheap as far as hardware reproduction. But if you want to get more fancy, then you can add all kinds of features to it, like basically putting on 2 Fitbits or whatever on your feet, is you can measure your speed. You can measure your explosiveness by how fast your feet get apart from each other in a lunge. You can have it measure specifically, fencing movements. So you can see how many lunges did I do in this practice. Did I lunge 100 times? Did I lunge 50 times? You don't have to count manually when you're doing that that
Ralph
exercise.
Bisdorf drill. Yeah.
Yeah, Ralph Bisdorf. Where he mentioned counting how many times your feet touch the ground, how many foot touches you have, how many steps in a given period of time.
I still need to go through my video of myself from last night and do that. So.
Yeah, and it's if you're moving fast, that's hard.
Yes, it is.
So I imagine if the footwork in foil tends to be a little different. If you're doing realistic foil footwork, I'm sure foil fencers can be very fast with their feet if they want to, but if they're doing realistic foil footwork, it's not the same as saber movements. So, saber movements are probably even quicker. But you can get all kinds of biometric data by measuring your 2 feet separately. Mm-hmm. And that would be very useful. For me, if you can, even just the first function I mentioned, the proximity sensor, hand out 5 pairs of them to students to trade off for practice, and they can do their bouts and know when they're getting off balance, when their feet are too close together, stuff like that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Do you have anything else on your list? Because we went through everything on mine through other things that we were talking about. So
I do. I have one last one that gets a little wacky. This is the more I guess out there one, but I was thinking of I don't know if I started off thinking about gamification, which is a thing that a lot of not fencing coaches, but coaches and educators in general, they always try to find ways to gamify things. Mm-hmm. I've always thought of a thing like Dance Dance Revolution video game that can give you the prompts, and you can move it in a way to make it more related to fencing. So the easiest way that I imagine is to have like, some little mini projector that you can mount either on the wall if you have an accessible ceiling up there, and that can just display different lights on a strip that can be targets for you to hit. So from there, the sky's the limit as to what you can come up with. You can make it go for pure speed by having you run one direction, then the other, not run, forward, fencing forward.
Footwork run.
Yeah. For distance and for stamina, you can have very quick changes of direction. You have to hit all the targets with advances, retreats. You can have it make you lunge to different lengths out to work on, different extensions of the lunge. You can do stuff like that. How to follow a rhythm, a person's rhythm, and how to stay with it, or how to completely break a rhythm and move arrhythmically, stuff like that. And one even wackier idea I had was you can program it with an existing fencer's speed, and movement. So you can say, I want to train to, to fence Aaron Salagi or Osanguk or somebody, and have it move the way they did in their last bout, So
that's ambitious.
Case, I guess that would be very difficult to have it start at one on-guard line and split second later be at the other on-guard line. But if you have like a visual indicator, you say, if I need to do a fake and, jump back or get out of the way, I need to do it at this speed. It makes it like more real. And as a bonus, a lot of clubs that are starting out or school programs, they don't have lines set up on the floor. So if you have a projector, you can say, set up my virtual strip. Maybe it can project on-guard lines, end lines, stuff like that. You have an instant strip, so you don't have to.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Around with tape.
Yeah. All right, Mike. Thank you for talking about this stuff. I think a lot of these things are, they're very much within reach, and they would be really easy for someone to do. So if someone is interested in developing any of the ideas that we mentioned in this video and would like to talk to us more about these ideas or collaborate on developing them, again, let us know in the comments, or you can reach out to me privately on Instagram.
Yeah, and I think it's it can be perceived as goofy for sure, but I think it's an important part because you can say, don't worry about this stuff. Let's just focus on fencing. We want to get better at fencing. We want to make fencing as it is as best as it can be. But I think there needs to be an aspirational aspect to it, and ways to improve. You can say the sport, or improve the perception of the sport, or improve. Definitely, I think there's a lot of improvement to be made in training methods.
Yeah,
I think training methods in a lot of places are outdated, but
I don't think it's goofy at all. I mean, some of the technology that we use, like the body cords and the technology for like the foils and the epées, were made in like the 90s, and that's if I'm being generous.
That's true.
So
that's true.
There's definitely room to update that, and I mean, these things they're not far-fetched at all based on common technology that we have.
No, and that's a good point because, I think the body cords probably go even further than the 90s, but
yeah, I'm sure.
But at the time, I'm sure people thought
it was a modern wonder.
Yeah. And that we should stick to just, dry fencing because that's the real fencing and stuff like that. So yeah, agreed on that point.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks for having me.